What will the future of real estate look like? Is conventional real estate dying? Join us while we dive into conversations to explore that very question and attempt to demystify current and potentially new real estate trends with the disruptors themselves. Hello, Erin. I am so stoked to have you officially on the show. I know we were able to connect over a real life coffee not that long ago. So thank you so much for taking time this post Super Bowl Monday to chat with me.
Thanks so much, Amy. I'm definitely excited to be here and have this conversation, which is honestly one of my favorite things to talk about.
Why don't you give us a little intro, if you will, a little bit. Who is Erin and where did you get started? And we'll go from there.
My name is Erin Crocker, and I was born and raised in Calgary, and I've been a real estate lawyer for over 12 years now.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know, it just goes by so fast. So I actually initially started my practice in a small town in northern BC, Smithers. I don't know if anyone's heard of it.
I
And
have. I don't know if anyone else has, but I have for
yeah,
what that's worth.
it's about halfway between Prince George and Prince Rupert, way up in northern BC. So it was a very interesting experience working in a small town. And I actually did quite a bit of residential and commercial real estate, as well as some development work out there. After that, I spent a few years back in Alberta, in-house counsel for a title insurance company. And then just recently, in the past few years, I've been back in Calgary, solo practitioner, just doing exclusively residential real estate. And then in 2021, I launched my own practice, Pasco Real Estate Law, and that's where I am today.
So was that the start of COVID?
Not officially, but I did start out on my own during COVID. So that was kind of the beginning of the whole virtual digital services for residential real estate closings.
What foresight, right? You didn't know what was coming, but you kind of hit the nail on the head. And who knew that it was going to be such a growth opportunity and people were really going to need it? So that brings us to, so kind of COVID happens. You're out on your own. Is that when you discovered the need for a virtual law firm type service?
100%. So actually during COVID, I was still working in-house for the title insurance company. And my job was actually to sell title insurance to real estate lawyers. So all of my clients were these real estate lawyers. And we had some changes in legislation during that time. Prior to that, we weren't allowed to sign with clients in person. But of course, COVID changed all that and they changed some of the regulations. And so now lawyers were suddenly allowed to sign with clients virtually. And so I'd be talking to my clients, all these real estate lawyers, and I'd be like, hey, are you guys, signing virtually with clients? Like, that's so cool. We can do that now. And Amy, the answer was no. We're
Oh
actually
no.
we're doing everything that we can to avoid having to learn how to do a virtual signing. So these lawyers were like setting up signing tables in parking garages,
Oh
having clients.
my good Lord. You are joking.
No, they'd be like, yeah, come sign on the hood of
Wow.
a car and like, the parking lot. Like it was nuts. They were doing everything they could to try to avoid like learning how to do a virtual signing. So I thought, what a missed opportunity, right?
Talk about being so rigid in things that are never going to be the same again.
Yeah, and lawyers are especially bad for this, right? Because it's just the way that it's always been done. Of course, your clients come in person, and of course, you sit down and go over the documents, right? So I think there's a real tradition there that most law firms don't want to break, and they feel that that's just part of their job is that they meet with their clients in person to sign.
Holy cow. Okay, so you saw a gap actually in the marketplace for something like this. So that makes complete sense to me. And this is so new, and there's not a lot of law firms and lawyers offering this service. So have you seen a huge uptick the post-COVID world, if you will?
Definitely, I do see more law firms offering virtual signings, but the problem is I still think you want to have not just like a good experience at closing, but a great experience, right? And if you're not good at a virtual signing, it can be clunky. Some of these law firms are asking their clients to print a big stack of papers and bring
Oh,
it in
wow.
and, have them sign and hold it up to the camera. So it can be a bit of an awkward experience. And so I thought, okay, we're going to specialize in virtual signing, but we're going to do it really well. We're going to try to make it as like smooth and efficient as possible because that's what we're going to be good at.
I love that. Okay, so I have two questions here. The first one is like, how do you ensure it's such a great experience for people because that is such a great focus for you? And then I wanted to circle back to something that you mentioned earlier about title insurance because I think that that's something that not a lot of people really understand what it is. Chicken or egg, choose which question you'd like to start with.
Okay, so title insurance, I feel like could be a whole episode on
Oh
itself,
gosh,
but
yes.
as for, creating a great experience, so I always say the last experience, which is closing, is the lasting experience, right? And so you can do this great job as an agent or a broker, getting the deal done, getting it all funding and ready for closing. But if the real estate lawyer law firm kind of drops the ball, that can leave a bad taste in the mouth of the client for the whole experience because really they see us as a team, right? Like
Mhm.
when something's going wrong, they're like, hey, you guys, like they see us as sort of one. And
They
so I
sure
really,
do.
yeah, and you're like, it's not my fault. It's like, I can't control that, but it's true that they do, right? So I think it's super, super important to be partnering with law firms who get that and have that real client experience, like in mind for closing, right? Because it does impact whether you're going to get a good review, whether that buyer is going to recommend you to somebody else. So experience at closing is super important. There are a whole bunch of ways we do it, right? One, it's just through the virtual signings, to just communication. Honestly, like I feel like even without any technology, people just want to know what's going on. They want to be prepared for what's to come, and they just want to know if there's any issues so that there isn't, stress and anxiety on closing day.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. I always make the joke with my clients. I'm like, nobody likes surprises unless it's a wine delivery. And they usually
Yeah,
get a good chuckle, but it's so true. Like, especially on closing day, there's lots of excitement, nerves. You don't need anything, like any unforeseen things kind of popping up.
exactly.
So that brings us over to some key advantages. Like there sounds like there's a plethora of advantages that Pasco does offer compared to a traditional real estate firm in terms of virtual signing. And you did like touch on a lot of them. And I think like from me as we chat, like one of the key ones is you don't have to take an hour or two for like a 30, 40 minute, whatever appointment. So are there any other sort of key advantages to Pasco versus some traditional real estate?
You nailed it. One, it's convenience, right? Like COVID has really changed us in the way that we want to interact with our services. So if it's not the dentist, I don't really want to have to go out and meet with a professional, right? It's so much more convenient not to have to take time off work, drive around the city, find
Find
parking.
parking.
Yeah. Or even just like sit in the waiting room, like waiting for your literally a 15-minute appointment to sign documents, right? We have all this technology, DocuSign now. Agents aren't even meeting with their clients to sign the contract. It's all signed digitally these days. So convenience is a big one, absolutely. And then there's people out of town, of course. We have so many buyers from Ontario and BC who may not physically be here at the time of signing. And it is more expensive for them to have to find a local lawyer or notary to sign with when they could really just meet with their own lawyer virtually. And then finally, I find that the experience is so different than what they have maybe done in the past or what they were sort of expecting.
Mhm.
When I was in that traditional law firm practice where we were meeting with clients in person, the joke with clients was always like, oh, wow, I just like sign my life away, right? Like
Yes.
yeah, right. It's overwhelming, right? And part of that is just having to come in and the whole like experience leading up to actually meeting with the lawyer, right? Whereas I find when people are in the comfort of their own home, just even
Mhm.
in their own office at work, it's much more focused and it's less stressful, right? They can just really focus on what they're signing, we're reviewing it. I find that they say at the end of it, like, wow, that's it. Like that was
Yeah.
everything. Like they're so surprised that it's just that easy.
That is such a nice thing to hear, I'm sure.
I love hearing it. It's my favorite thing. And it's exactly why I do what I do.
Never gets old, hey?
No, never. Yeah.
Have you encountered any sort of resistance to folks that maybe it's their first time to the virtual process, or do you also offer it in person as well? Or Maybe you could touch on both pieces there.
I do offer in-person signings. I do have an office and clients do come in and sign documents from time to time. They'd rather do that than do the virtual thing. But I do think it's a bit of a misconception that, older people aren't good at this or like, that they
Mhm.
can't do it because COVID actually made a lot of older people really good at Zoom. And so I find that it's, not necessarily true, like that they're not good at it. The other thing is sometimes they're the ones that benefit from it the most. Like I signed with people who are like in care facilities that have limited mobility, and they may not be good at technology, but there's often a support person that can help. I've even had the agent go and help with just setting up the virtual signing for them. So, I wouldn't say necessarily just because someone is older or maybe not good at technology that a virtual signing isn't appropriate or they couldn't do it.
I love that. That's great. And it's kind of tapping into like a niche that really needs the service, but maybe, like you said, are not as mobile as they once were.
Yeah, exactly, right?
So, because you're kind of really pushing the boundaries here, offering real estate services, law services digitally, do you do anything to stay sort of at the forefront of innovation or adapt? Do you look for other emergent trends maybe that you could also employ?
I always listen for the friction. And
Mm,
it can just be those little tiny things that we think, oh, they're not a big deal. It's just normal part of the process. People get confused about it. But I'm always listening for just something that people might be like, I didn't understand that question on your intake form. Just something that can make the process a little bit better. I don't use technology for the sake of technology. It actually has to improve something or make the experience better.
I
Um,
love, love, love hearing this.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm at the forefront of technology. I'm at the forefront of like the client experience. So how can we make things a little bit easier, a little bit less friction? And if technology helps with that, that's great. There's all kinds of innovation happening with legal technology all the time. We have new conveyancing software, Law Society changing their rules about digital ID verification. So there's lots of things happening, and we incorporate that where it makes sense, where it can improve our processes and for the client, to understand what's happening better or just for it to be a little bit more smooth for them.
Don't you wish everybody who are in some sort of like client facing type role thought the same? Like, why
Right?
don't we think about how we can make this easier for the people that need to use our services? I freaking love that. That is awesome. One thing I forgot to mention is you are licensed in both Alberta and BC. So providing a service like this is tremendously helpful for working in two different jurisdictions, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I'm actually licensed in three jurisdictions. So
Holy
Alberta,
moly.
yeah, so I do Alberta, BC, and Ontario. So it really just arose over the need for so many people moving here from those different provinces and
Mhm.
being able to have one lawyer deal with both sides of the transaction. So, if they're selling in Ontario and they're buying in Alberta, they can have one lawyer deal with the sale, bridge financing, and the purchase in Alberta. So we are available in all three provinces and offer services for properties in any of those provinces.
Talk about trying to anticipate friction and alleviating the pain points. That is awesome and very smart because, as you touched on, our migration numbers from those other provinces to specifically the Calgary area is bananas.
It's crazy. Yeah, you probably see it more than I do, but more and more every time I have a meeting with a client, it's like, oh, they're signing in Ontario, in like the UK. Like it's crazy. People are coming from all over.
I think that's part of what's making Calgary flourish right now with some cool new bars and restaurants and things to do. So it's awesome to see more folks coming and kind of shaping our city. So looking ahead, like what do you envision for the future of virtual signing in real estate? Or like how do you think Pasco can contribute to the evolution of the real estate lawyer experience?
Yeah, so we actually have some really exciting stuff happening in Alberta land titles coming up. So I know you've probably heard that Alberta land titles is very slow, we're very paper-based, and that is all true.
I was like, exciting and land titles have never been put together before. So let's hear
Yeah,
more.
so we are actually going digital with land titles in the next few years. So what that means is that right now we do have to sign documents physically, wet ink, and submit them like by courier to land titles. You wouldn't believe this in this day and age, but that is how we'd still do it. But they are working to digitize the system. So that means similar to provinces like Ontario and BC, clients can sign their documents electronically. We submit those electronically and they get things like their title within days, not like months. So
Holy.
yeah, so that'll definitely make an impact. It'll also just improve that virtual signing experience because, of course, right now, with having to sign things in hard copies, it just creates a little bit more of like a clunky kind of
Mhm.
signing. Whereas, in other provinces, we literally can just sign everything via DocuSign and the clients don't have to print anything.
That is cool. So a couple of years we'll see that come, maybe, knock on wood. I mean, I've seen projects before, so I know that there's always
Yeah, that's what I
surprises.
promised. I hear the budget is there and that they're going to iteratively like roll it out. So it won't happen all at once, obviously, but hopefully we can see an improvement in the way that land titles deals with documents, which, just all improves our processes too.
Well, that's awesome. And I think that will make everybody's lives easier. As a realtor in BC, it is pretty slick to be able to just go into one system and see things pretty easily.
Right? And it is surprising we're still so behind in Alberta, but it is what it is.
It's funny because I feel like we're honestly ahead in some areas. And then I look at something else and I'm like, oh dear. Nope. There we go.
Yeah.
So, one question that I like to ask all of my guests, and this is a bit selfish on my part because I like to get new book recommendations or training for myself. But if you could offer a recommendation on your favorite book, and it can be, an entertainment book, a business book, self-help book, whatever, or some type of training, is there one that really stands out at the forefront of your mind?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not a super brand new book, but Think Again by Adam Grant.
What's this about? I haven't heard of this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a good one. So the key message in that book is basically, we live in this constantly changing world, and it really pays to change your mind about things. So learning how to rethink ideas, be less rigid in your beliefs, and also how to make other people rethink their ideas and change their minds, right? So it's a
Mm.
good one if you're in the business of having to influence people and perhaps change their beliefs about things. So that's a good one. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna bump this one up on top of my list. I did a video last week, I think it was, or the week before, which was a little bit controversial. And then I ended up going out for breakfast with somebody who shared the opposite belief. We ended up spending like 2 or 3 hours together. And by the end of it, I was like, not that what I previously thought was necessarily terrible or wrong, but it did expand my ideas to think that maybe there is justification to different models and there is no one size fits all. And I was like, shit. So I'm going to read the book because I think personally it would be very helpful. Sometimes I get very caught up in my convictions, and it's nice to get other people's standpoints. So that's great.
Yeah, and I think we live in in some ways, a polarized world right now, and it's just we
Oh.
don't know how to ask the right questions to be able to understand another point of view, and even to be open to us changing our minds about that, right? So it was a good read. I still remember quite a few good points in that book. Yeah.
Is it one of those ones that you would read like a few times? Because
Yeah.
there's
Oh,
some of those
100%.
books, right? Where
Mhm.
you're like, okay, I've read this. You kind of go through life a couple years back. You're like, oh crap, I should really go back because there's some good nuggets there that I need to refresh.
It's a skill set too, right? Like we don't learn these skills anywhere. So, how
Hmm.
how do you influence people? And it typically doesn't work to just be like, "Hell, this is my opinion and this is why I'm right," right? Like we all had those arguments with people before.
Yeah, it usually ends poorly. Usually ends poorly. Oh my gosh. Well, this was awesome. We'll have to get you back again because I think that there's so much that we can really like dig into on the real estate lawyer side and some key things that maybe is a good just FAQ for folks like what is title insurance, RPRs. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, RPRs. So we're going to have you back and dive more deeply into the intricacies, if you will, of closing a real estate transaction.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much, Amy. And it's also been a pleasure to chat this morning.
Thank you so much for joining the conversation and exploring both current and predicted future real estate trends. Want to keep the conversation going? You can find us, Future RE, on both Instagram and TikTok.